Hello everyone, my name is Steve Yabs, and today I will be talking about October 1955. Now some of you, that may seem like quite a long period of time ago, but actually it was only 58 years and about a month ago when October 1955 was around. Now, one of the first things that people talk to me about when they mention October 1955 is they talk about this little baby boy that was smiling all the time, a little bit chubby for his age, enjoyed having a good time all day and all night. Well, that just happened to be me. Back in the day when I was a young kid, I was happy-go-lucky. I enjoyed life, and even though it's hard to remember that first year of 1955 that I was born, still I have a lot of memories that people have told me. Some of the things that I did at that time were quite funny, such as drinking some glitter. They had this stuff called glitter, and it came in these little small plastic containers, and they gave a stick with that container, and you would take that stick, dip it into the little glitter, and it was kind of a liquid glitter, and then you would put that on paper and make drawings on it. They even had some papers that were actually number coded so that you would be able to color code your glitter to the picture. It was pretty cool. Well, anyways, I drank a little paper cup of that, and needless to say, my mother made me drink something like tea or something to that effect, and I threw it all back up. Anyway, that's the story of the glitter in my young days. Nevertheless, what I would like to do is talk about some people and events that occurred in October 1955. Let's start out with Elvis Presley, some pop and some culture. Elvis was known for his rock and roll, and many of the concerts that he gave and played in. He was a very extravagantly dressed individual with lots of jewelry. His hair was slicked back quite a bit. And one of the things about Elvis is that he was a black belt in karate. And he first started to sing as a Christian in a church. Well, one of the first things that occurred in 1955 in October concerning Elvis was that he had his first riot at a concert of his on stage at Jacksonville, Florida. I think that was kind of a cool thing. I remember when the Beatles had riots and different various other artists through the years, but it never occurred to me that Elvis actually had a riot at one of his concerts as well. And I'm sure there was more than one, because what I found was just the very first one, and that was in October of '55. Another musician I would like to bring up is Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry was a rhythm and blues guitar player, singer, outstanding. Well, when he was a teen, he went to jail for 3 years because of robbery. He robbed a bakery, a clothing store, and a barbershop, and received 3 years for that. It was one of them things when he was just stupid, he just did it. And I brought up Chuck because he was born in October 1955. Also, some of the things that Chuck Berry brought up was some wonderful music, such as Maybelline, Roll Over Beethoven, and Johnny Be Good. I don't know if any of you have heard those songs, but there's some pretty cool songs for that era especially, and I'm sure that many of the young people today can relate to these particular songs as well. He was also known as the father of rock and roll. I think many people thought that Elvis was known as the father of rock and roll, but it was actually Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry had this way about him that he could play that guitar, he could just jam on them chords, and many musicians that followed him sort of paid homage to him because of his greatness. Many of those prior I should say actually later, musicians that listened to Chuck Berry and that knew him, played many of his licks from his music. In October 1955, there were many movies that came out. A couple of the movies that I thought were pretty cool was the movie by James Dean, the actor. Actually, he was the starring actor in this movie, Rebel Without a Cause, which was a very well-known movie back in the day, and also East of Eden, which was another movie back in the day. And both of those movies were in October of 1955. And one of the things that I found interesting is in October of 55, James Dean was buried after he was in a car accident. Another movie that played was a musical, and it was known as Oklahoma. This musical was about two pairs of lovers, and it was set in the Oklahoma Territory. Now, I'm not really into that, two lovers musical, Oklahoma Territory kind of thing, but I'll bet you there's somebody out there in my audience, in my electronic audience, that is, that probably would like something like that. Another movie that was out in that time was To Catch a Thief. It was a story that took place in the French Riviera, and it was the story about a jewel thief and the different robberies that he did along the French Riviera. Very interesting in that time and age. Also in 55, in October, there were some technological advances that were made. For example, Sony came out with its first portable transistor radio. And it was probably about yay big like this. And it was actually made in Japan. It was Japanese. Because Sony's a Japanese company at that time, and it probably still is today. I didn't check on that. But nevertheless, they did have a transistor radio, and it had like 8 or 9 different channels on it that you could listen to. And it was pretty cool for back in the day. Another thing that I found interesting was a company called Kappan sold its first in-home microwave oven. And what I found interesting about this was, first off, was that it was rather large. I mean, it was like huge, okay? And the cost of this microwave was $1,295. Now, you can walk to the store today and you can, how about going to a yard sale instead of going to the store? You could go to a yard sale and you could pick yourself up a microwave for like $20, $30. At the store, $50 to $100, you can get yourself a brand new small microwave. Works great. But back in 55, when these things first came out, they were rather large, bulky, they were brand new, and needless to say, they didn't sell too many of them in that day. There were some pretty cool inventions back in 55. Some of those inventions was, for an example, there was this Swiss amateur mountaineer. Well, he used to take his dog out into the mountains, out through the snow, and walk through the little trails and that. And when he came back home, on one occasion, he noticed all the birds that were on his dog's fur. So instead of tending to his dog and, pulling them birds out of there, what he did is he grabbed one of those birds, and he went over to his microscope, and he got out his microscope, and he checked it out, and he seen how all these hooks were in the burr, and how it just hooked onto any kind of cloth or whatever. So over the course of the next 2 years, he created something called Velcro. And I'll bet you every one of us has used Velcro at one time or another. I just used it the other day at work, hold a couple things together. I don't think it's as good as duct tape, but, it did the job the other day for me. Another invention that I thought was pretty cool was hovercraft. A hovercraft is a machine that floats across the top of the water versus going in and through the water. It was created by a British inventor in 1955. I was in the Marines for 8 years, and when we went from ships to land, Most of the time it was in helicopters and in Amtrak vessels, which were vessels that came off the back of the ship, went through the water, and they were motorized. Somebody drove them, and they stuck out about 12 inches above the surface of the water, and the rest of the machine was underneath the water, and we would go to shore like that. Nevertheless, in the Marine Corps today, they have hovercraft. Now, these hovercraft are huge. They can carry tanks, they can carry personnel, they can carry artillery, they can carry anything, military-wise. And those float across the water, and they go right up onto the shore and unload at that time. Thought that was pretty cool. In fact, when I lived on the other side of the state, not too far from where I lived at, in the North Shores area, about 1.5 miles from Lake Michigan, they had a hovercraft that went from Muskegon all the way over to Wisconsin. There were a couple cool people back in 1955. Well, more than a couple if I can throw myself in there too. But nevertheless, let's talk about two famous people that I'm sure you may have heard of before. And I would like to say that one of those people is Bill Gates. He created the company Microsoft. He and Steve Jobs were in competition with each other over the years. And one time he hacked into his high school computer so that he could manipulate how many girls were in each one of his classes. He made sure that he had more girls than boys in each one of his classes. I thought that was pretty unique. There was also another actress named Tanya Roberts. She was one of the Charlie's Angels back in the day. She was born in '55. She was also in the movie A View to a Kill, and she spent 6 months in Kenya studying for her role in Sheena, which was another movie at the time. You might know her as Mitch on the '70s show. Here's a couple small trivia items that pertain to 1955. Let's talk about the cost of living for a moment. Minimum wage was $1. It was actually raised to $1 in 1955. People made about $3,851 a year. The average rent per month was about $87. A new car was $1,900 and gas was 23 cents a gallon. Seatbelts were installed in cars. The Honeymooners TV show and Alfred Hitchcock Presents, as well as the Mickey Mouse Club and Captain Kangaroo, debuted on TV in 1955. I remember those. Captain Kangaroo was my favorite. Historical events that occurred in 1955. One of them I thought was pretty cool was the first all-girl radio station in the world was created in Memphis, Tennessee. It was created in a hotel. We took up a couple rooms in a hotel, and it was called WHER, W-HER. And throughout the offices, the decor was feminine throughout, and it was known as the Doll's House. And the control rooms were called playrooms, and the stationery was perfume. I thought that was pretty neat. Then we can move on to another historical event back in '55, and that was when the Brooklyn Dodgers became the world champions. This was their 8th World Series. They had lost the first 7, and in this 8th one, they won. And the pitcher, Johnny Padres, he threw a shutout, which was just a fantastic game. So, in conclusion, there were many things in 1955 that I thought were very interesting. Way, way, way too many to try to write down, put them into anything that would take, just a few minutes of our time to come across here. Like from Elvis Presley to Alfred Hitchcock to the Mickey Mouse, show to just the cost of gas was just really cool, I thought. So I was really glad to have the opportunity to be born in 1955. They had some cool cars from back in that era, I remember. And even though I don't remember much of it, I can tell you it was a great place to be. People seemed to really get along well, and everything was cool, from the great music to the movies to the cheap gas and housing and Captain Kangaroo. Thanks a lot.